The future of work has a lot of moving parts to it. One of the topics that always rises when we talk about future of work is skills. And in this next panel discussion, we're going to talk about and explore how can leaders who are at the end of the day, coaches, move future of work trends in a direction that creates opportunity for all workers at all corners of their workforce. So this session's on skills. It's an exciting one. I'm going to be leading this action-packed panel. I'll be joined by James Webb. James is the VP of Global People Development, Engagement, and Communications at Fossil Group. James brings a wealth of experience across employee relations, training, engagement, comms, is at the forefront at an organization that uses tech consistently to onboard and upskill workers. He was the former head of organizational development and learning at Zale Jewelers, and he's the former VP of organizational development and HR at Blockbuster. So James brings a tremendous amount of experience to this discussion around what we need to be doing around skills. Welcome, James. We also have Quashan Lockett. Quashan is the Vice President and Head of HR at Legends. Legends, if you haven't heard about them, operates some of the biggest and best venues and travel and entertainment locations across the globe, including One World Trade Center. He joined Legends in 2017 and led the people function with oversight for all HR, talent, culture, and diversity and inclusion activities. I'm super excited to have Quashan here. Also excited to be joined by Joanne Lynn. Joanne is a principal at Newark Venture Partners, brings a ton of experience from everything, including investment banking, private equity, venture capital, entrepreneurship. Her most recent role was an education investor with University Ventures, where Joanne sourced, vetted, and supported seed and growth stage investment companies that are transforming the higher ed space. She's also a co-founder of a Newark-based social enterprise called Locust Labs, that's aimed at expanding community access to digital manufacturing technology. She was previously an investment banking associate at JP Morgan and a Teach for America Corps member in New York City. So I'm excited about this next panel talking skills. So let's get started.
Great. So, with that, I'm excited to have everybody joining us today for this next panel on skills. The focus in this session is going to be on how leaders and what the role of leadership is in the future of work. Excited to be joined by an all-star lineup here, and to kick us off, we'll go around the horn and let everybody give their quick background of who they are and their current role. We'll start, Joanne, if you could start us off.
Sure. So my name's Joanne Lynn. I'm a principal at Newark Venture Partners. We're an early stage technology venture fund that's investing in B2B software, which includes investing in the future of work across industries. Just background-wise, and I think it's relevant, is my prior role was at a firm called University Ventures that was also investing in the transformation of higher education and this continuation of lifelong learning. So I'm very happy to be, full disclosure, an investor in One Huddle and also just part of this conversation because I think it's very important.
Great. Thanks, Joanne. Quashan with Legends.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Appreciate you inviting me to this session. I think this is fantastic. I am head of HR for Legends, also lead our D&I. Legends is a global agency in the sports and entertainment space. So we do a lot of different things, hospitality, sales, planning, attractions within the sports space. And I head up our HR team, everything from HR to diversity and inclusion, talent acquisition. We are we just moved, we have a UK office and we just moved into the Madrid, Spain space just a couple months ago.
Sure. Thanks, Q. And James Webb with Fossil Group.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for the opportunity for me to be here today. So as mentioned, James Webb, I am the head of global people development, engagement, and communication for the organization. Fossil is a company you probably think of when you think retail stores, but we actually are a global developer and designer of watches, and currently develop about 16 different brands in the marketplace.
Great. Well, let's get started. Joanne, I wanted to start with you on this topic, primarily because I feel like having a definition of future of work from somebody who has spent a lot of time evaluating and looking at technology companies and looking at potential investments, also in education. What is your definition of future of work?
Yeah, Yeah, that's a great question because it's a very broad and to some extent overused term, right? But it's a term that should constantly be redefined as well, just given the speed at which our workplaces are changing because of technology or just because of external factors. But I think in terms of future of work and from our perspective as investors, we're trying to anticipate what the fundamental changes in skills and qualities of our workforce are going to happen because of demographic changes, because of introduction of technology, because of just new industries popping up. What are the skills and qualities that our workers need to have to be successful in that future environment? Those are the types of interventions and tools that we're looking at when we think of future of work.
It's great. I'd love to bring it to, Q and James, because I think on this front, both of your businesses at Fossil Group and at Legends, you interact with so many workers at so many corners of the workforce, from frontline to full-time and leadership roles. Maybe starting with Q, what are you seeing, to Joanne's point on skills? When you look at the skills that are needed to succeed in today's workforce, is there anything that any observations you've had or gleaned?
Yeah, I think and Joanne hit it, right on the nail, really, figuring out and continuing to redefine what that looks like. And I think one of the big pieces when we talk about skills for the workforce is really, technology is a big piece of the future of work. So that doesn't mean that the workforce or that people are going completely away. So how do people interact with technology? What are the skills that they need to be able to do that efficiently? And then how do they work efficiently with other people, growing workforce, when we have all these different demographics that are now coming into the workforce, whether it be from a generational standpoint or from a ethnicity, gender. We're getting to the point where there's all different kinds of people in the workforce in different positions that may not have been there before. And it really comes down to inclusive leadership and inclusive skills of how do you successfully collaborate and work with all sorts of different people in the scope of work, and also leveraging technology to do that.
James, what do you think about, to the same point on skills? What are your thoughts on what you're saying from Fossil?
So, if you think about really, both comments, it really involves a lot of change. And so as everything changes, whether it's technology or who we work or how we work, what I'm seeing is we really need people to be more curious than ever. So I know earlier we talked a little bit about lifelong learning from Joanne's background. And I think that's just a critical skill right now is you can't stop where you are today. You have to think about what's next. How do I move forward? And how do I do things differently as an individual in a company? A couple of other things that I'm seeing a lot of lately is just agility. So with all this change, it's like, how do I have the ability to change with it? How do I operate different tomorrow than I did yesterday? And the last two things that we've seen starting to emerge and even have been highlighted by the pandemic has just been trust and empathy. So, how do you build these deep relationships where as change occurs, as these different skills come about, how can I trust the people I work with? How can I trust the people I work for? And then how can we have empathy? Because we're going to make mistakes. This is new for all of us. We're upskilling ourselves and we're dealing with things that some of us have never dealt with before. So how do I really appreciate what the other person's going through, and how do I help them through it and understand them as they move down the way, so to speak?
Sure. James, at Fossil, you all have always been, I think in the short time we've known each other, I can glean that you all have been very active in technology, consistently, and trying to think innovative and stay ahead and build infrastructure. In the last few months, a lot of companies, I think, have been hurt by not having certain infrastructure in place to be prepared for something like COVID. Have you learned anything by sort of your preparedness, and especially being in the retail category?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So one is we were fortunate enough. You think about from a business standpoint, we had invested significantly into upgrading our ability to reach out to consumers directly from a digital perspective and from an e-com perspective. And so we've seen a huge dramatic shift to that, even more so. We all knew that was coming, but the COVID has expedited that. So really where everyone was headed was the right direction. We just had to move faster. And luckily enough, we've been investing in those things heavily over the last few years to be able to really pivot there. From a learning and capability standpoint, we were already virtual, we were already digital because from an e-learning standpoint, being able to deliver virtual classes using technology such as One Huddle, because we do operate in 100 plus countries around the world. So those were things that were very important to us. So what we saw was less change for us and for our employees, and just more usage of the things that we knew were already emerging. So one thing we learned is, in these areas, as far as digital capability, is what we learned is we actually need to go even deeper, faster, and in more ways.
Sure. Joanne, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, because James mentioned change, and I think that anything that's, especially even from my seat as a startup founder, there's been just so much change in such a short time. Has all that changed the way that you look at potential investments, or as you're looking at tech companies that are trying to tackle issues around the future of work?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's changed our perspective on how we evaluate companies, but it's changed the type of companies that we see starting up now and are looking for capital now. So there's, we started off talking about what this definition of future of work is. And if you were to describe the priorities for future of work oriented technology companies pre-COVID and which ones are popping up more and more now, I think those look very different. I think part of it is the difference between sort of these hard skills, things that are very measurable. I would say pre-COVID, everyone was focused on maybe intercompany mobility, retention, recruiting, getting folks into these jobs. And now I'm seeing a lot in terms of really actually managing your existing workforce. How do we create more ties between our existing workers because we're now so remote? How do we create environments where people can be successful? So there's a little bit of that shift in where priorities in terms of investment, whether it's a company that's investing in their people or as an investor investing in startups, a shift in how we think about where our priorities should lie in terms of the future of our workforce.
Sure. Hugh, there's so much talk about skill shortages, right? So even like bringing off just the conversation so far around skills and change. We had a former senator and governor from Nebraska yesterday, Bill Kerry, talk, and he made the comment around skill gaps and closing skill gaps specifically. In your seat, what do you think of when I say like close a skill gap? How do you even, how do you assess it? What are they? What are your observations right now from Legend's point of view?
Yeah, when I hear the term skill gap, it's for me, and it really is about and I think Joanne mentioned this early on, is really the continuous change and the continuous relooking at what the future of work actually is going to be. So when I look at skill gap, it's not even necessarily just about skills of today, but it's sort of anticipating what, as an employee or as a worker or even as a manager, what are the skills of tomorrow that we need to close that gap and try to get towards. And I think a lot of that has to do, again, with technology, making sure that our people understand how to leverage technology when we talk about how that's going to play into the future of work and the workforce. Automation obviously is a big piece of that. And then, really, when we talk about the time that we're in with this pandemic, right, no one sort of can anticipate the skills that were needed to kind of thrive during this period of time. And it's really a lot of, for lack of a better term, crisis management. So the ones who have been successful have been able to deal with ambiguity, deal with the crisis, if you will, but also come out on the other end better than kind of when they went in. And so it also kind of comes down to the values of the organization, right? We value ourselves at Legends and being very entrepreneurial spirit, very much about thriving through ambiguity. And I think those are the things that are not only values, but how do you take that and form and assess, okay, as an employee in a workforce, how do we prepare our employees and our workers for that type of environment, which we've inherently seen over the last 3, 4, 5 months during the pandemic, and how do we be prepared as we go forward for that?
Yeah, I mean, the theme of change and everything moving fast is real. Do you think, James, do you think that, when you think about the way that you use possible technology to impact retail workers, or you think about, coaching and development programs, like what are so many companies, missing, in your opinion, when it comes to having a well-rounded strategy to upskill people, reskill people, and move? You mentioned earlier agility and moving fast. Like, what have you found?
So I think from a MIS standpoint, and what makes it very complex is, it would be easy if it was one group that was changing, right? And so, or a certain, set of skills where you could say, okay, we just got to go knock these 4 out. But because this is, and while there's some areas that are obviously being more impacted than others, say maybe, needing more analytics or more digital capability as we kind of get into this new way of working. It's really impacting, every department, every group, every person. And so, where I find the biggest area of opportunity is just how do you take on something that massive and at scale for an entire workforce, right? And how do you prioritize that and move the entire business forward on not 4 or 5 skills, but 4 or 5 skills for 15 or 20 different groups that function differently and work differently, right? So to me, that's a big opportunity that's in front of all of us. Is just how do you tackle something that's so enormous, and then how do you prioritize it along the way?
It's always interested me that there's this sort of in between space between academia and education, and the responsibility of education to sort of sell a degree that properly prepares people for jobs today. And then on the other side, you have folks like you all, Q and James, on the corporate side that have to figure out how you get a new hire, skill them up appropriately, and then continue their career pathing forward. Joanne, you've been on both sides, right? You look at a lot of education companies, a lot of ed tech companies, especially with university ventures, and now you're also, you do a lot also on the on companies that are tackling future work. Like, where do you see like how are we doing between both of those groups? Or are they sort of like the right and the left that don't talk to each other?
There's definitely a huge gap in terms of theory and practice, right? And maybe, Sam, this is a stat that you're familiar with, but I think there was a study that was done that was saying that like 80% of those top level senior HR talent executives believe that coaching and development is a key leadership practice, but then they only think that 15% of managers in their organizations are actually good at it, right? And so if you're trying to James' point, an entire workforce at the junior or even entry level or mid management level are struggling and trying to manage their careers, just manage their pathways through one organization or multiple organizations. They need resources to be able to do that. And I don't think a lot of those resources are taken advantage of. And I think where the bottleneck is, and it's not necessarily that middle management isn't maybe prepared or skilled for it, but just in terms of how you think about the pyramid of a workforce, they are in a sense a bottleneck because a lot of that responsibility falls on them. So what are the tools and resources that we can make available to that part of our workforce to really empower everybody? I think that's what's missing and what's very difficult to manage from a senior executive perspective.
Hey, Sam, do you mind if I piggyback on that just a second?
Sure.
To Joanne's point, if you take everything she says And then you add the on top of it, the complexities of in what tools do you use, right? So most of those executives are also used to using a very traditional set of tools that have worked for the last 20 years, but that may not be the best set of tools for the way I learn today coming into the workforce for the first time. So, traditionally me going to sit in a class to close those skill gaps is not the way I want to be. It's not the way I want to interact. It's not the way I want to shop. It's not the way I live. And so I think the other challenge is how do we ensure that the technology actually, catches up, changes, and shifts to accommodate this new workforce that's coming in or these new skill sets that you need. And I think that's another huge complexity that adds to this, situation.
I would also add, James and Joanne, a big part of this is also, and there are studies that show that a big success of learning happens on the job, right? So we have to find a way that where we're not just trying to get people upskilled and trained before they move into whatever that role is how do we do that while they're already in there? And obviously that has inherent challenges because you have a day job to do, but we're also trying to learn as you go. So we've got to figure out a way to phase that in to where you're learning, but also being able to be productive and effective and perform highly at the job that you're doing.
Totally. The other thought right now, especially with the speed at which work is changing, right? I think we all agree that, I think maybe James made the comment earlier, things are being accelerated, especially in this moment. Some future of work trends that maybe we thought were farther away are being bumped up a little bit. I'd be interested to anybody's thought on this next question. As work changes, quicker, and as companies are trying to keep up with the way jobs are changing, there's this perspective that I don't want to say robots are going to take everybody's job, but we've all heard read enough articles to see enough stuff about that. But I think that there's validity that automation is going to impact certain frontline roles with a different level of velocity than it's going to impact other roles. But as frontline labor gets automated potentially, you're going to have to move people into some leadership or coaching roles quicker. What are your, I guess, opening it up, thoughts on that as a possibility, or how you're preparing for it, or how you're thinking about it?
From my perspective, I do think there's a lot of things that you can automate and that you can do. I mean, I was thinking about it the other day, when you look at the industry that supplies all of our, basically the food chain, and, you read about all of them having to deal with being hit by the pandemic very hard. You immediately go to, gosh, if you could have automated that whole process and not had to, really exposed all those people to that, how much better would it have been for them, for all of us, et cetera. And so you start to see, you start to see that evolution occurring, and during a pandemic, you even start to ask yourselves, how can you do even more of that so you take people out of being, put in harm's way, so to speak. However, where I currently see things coming about is why that's all possible. It's just such a significant investment too. So I do believe why we're going to see some shifts in that direction. I know for us especially, it's just something that's not going to be immediate just because of the cost involved, the change that has to occur to actually make that happen. It just doesn't make it, it's a hard investment to sell, so to speak, of what you need to do to be successful at really moving in that direction.
I'll jump in from my industry. So I'm in the sports business, and a portion of our business is hospitality, so food and beverage in the sports environment. And so there's all sorts of conversations out there where people will say, well, your concession workers or your food and beverage frontline staff, that can be automated. And so when I think of, okay, what does that look like for our workforce and what changes, I think there's just a greater emphasis on the customer experience and the fan engagement, right? So that tactical work can be done through automation. I think there's still obviously a big emphasis on the fan and on the customer. So do those, what are the skills that those employees and those workers need to continue to drive the engagement piece beyond the transactional piece. And that's where my mind would shift to that.
Yeah. What you started off the panel with, Sam, was you were talking about how amid this great technological change, a lot of times we forget about the group of folks that are the basis of future of work, which are the workers, right? And this human element is never going to be fully automated. So what are the skill sets that we can train that that frontline workforce in order to help them be more effective? To Q's point about customer experience, those true human qualities that will further enhance the company's goals, right? Whether it's in the sports and entertainment space or the retail space. I don't think that component is ever going to go away. So shifting more towards maybe soft skills than those hard technical skills is where I think a lot of the focus is going to go.
Yeah, look at where we are with the pandemic. I mean, there's still a people element, and you said the humanizing. I mean, people are yearning that human connection, right? Just being not able to go out, not able to interact, like that is never going to go away. So if you can shift to the skills that really hit on the humanized piece and the people piece of whatever business that you're in, that's where I think the skills will evolve to talk about automation.
Sure. James, have you done, I guess, during the COVID time, as you operate remote, you still try to keep people work ready and connected and together? Like, I think like the definition of training is maybe shifted a little bit, because there's maybe not certain things you can train on as well when you're in a pause. Have you learned anything in this, the last few months about what the impact of training can be, or any strategies that have worked for you guys if possible?
Yeah, so some of that's through what we've done, and some of that I've learned has just been amazing. It's just the agility of us just as an overall culture, and just from a people standpoint. I've been so impressed, while we have the technology and things in place to help enable it, I've been so impressed with how our employees have been able to transition so successfully to, being in an office 100% of the time, 5 days a week, to working remotely and still doing an amazing job. So it's been something I've been extremely impressed with. And even sometimes, as I've gone out to other places to maybe get some to-go order, or, driven by and seen a restaurant, how they've been automatically able to, convert something to still do business. It's just been very impressed overall with just our ability as a society to adapt during something so severe. So with that, one of the things that we've learned, a lot of is why there always has been this notion of, you can't train certain things outside of a classroom. I think the way we're looking at it now is, you can't train certain things when you're not in person, but it doesn't have to be in a classroom. And so we're finding, our virtual experiences to be just as effective and just as engaging as it was when we were sitting down, stairs all together in a room. Why it may not create the full connection that the other colleagues mentioned, today, it is creating somewhat of a connection, and more importantly, it is still giving people the skills they need to be successful. And we're even starting to look at how do we take that concept and how do we move it to more individual experiences to follow up, which in the past we didn't always do, which to me is the most important thing, is how do you make that training stick? And so now how are we doing these individual virtual coaching sessions to make that happen? And people are actually feeling a little bit more comfortable with that, because now it's just starting to be part of how they operate daily, is virtually.
Sure, totally. I appreciate everybody's time on this panel. I have one final question we've been asking everybody, and I'd like to go again around the horn with your response to it. And it's been super eye-opening for me to hear perspectives from, like we mentioned earlier, whether it's people in community leadership, nonprofits, technology, investment, C-level leaders, talent leaders, diversity leaders. My question is, and maybe Joanne, you can start, what is your hope for the future of work?
I think to reiterate one of the points that it's been discussed throughout, right? My hope is that while we continue to invest in technology, that we don't lose that the humanizing factors to a workforce. I think to some extent we've seen that shift as the pandemic has really forced us to reevaluate what skills and abilities are crucial to maintaining a strong workforce. I want that to continue. So not really losing that human side of it, even though technology will continue to be a big part of the future of work.
Great. Thank you. James, how about you? What do you think? What's your hope for the future of work?
So, similar to Joanne is that we don't forget the customer in all this. So, it was mentioned earlier that, in hospitality, what do they want and how does that experience become even more important? So, as work changes, as, automation comes in, that we still keep that consumer in mind and what they really want and what they really need. And in addition to that, that we don't forget that there is an employee experience and it is a differentiator, and that we don't stop making sure that it's the best it can be, to really be able to support the business and support the people that we serve on a daily basis.
Great. Q, you get the last word.
Yeah, for me, 2 words: inclusive leadership. And it's something that I'm super passionate about, something that I truly believe in. And what I mean by that is, as we think of the future of work and the evolution, we have to have diverse representation and perspectives. Technology, automation, those things don't just happen, right? Somebody's coming up with the framework and building those out. Have to have diverse set of mindsets and thoughts and perspectives and genders and generations at the table coming up with what that looks like. And then similar to what Joanne and James said, is having that inclusive leadership piece of making sure that all perspectives are being thought of as we come up with the solution, whatever the skills are, whatever the framework is, whatever the path forward is. Having that diversity and that inclusiveness and building that out will only serve for the greater good of making sure everybody's represented in what this looks like in the future.
Well, this was a great. I got all types of notes, everybody. So this has been awesome. I really appreciate your participation and sharing. Joanne, James, Q, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing, Sam.
Take care.
Cool.
What's happening, everyone? I'm Keith from the Doghouse Operations team. What has to change to better prepare the next generation of worker? One of my favorite quotes from Rocky IV. Rocky states, "If I can change and you can change, then everybody can change." And I think this is the type of attitude that needs to be developed. And the next generation need to find a way to build a positive trust and communication for collaboration. We must be able to embrace what advantages the next generation can bring to our workforce, not neglect or shut down their strengths. It's our responsibility and our generation's responsibility for setting the standards high, maybe higher than any one of us can achieve. But the current workforce needs to adapt their beliefs to create an environment to welcome hardworking, free-thinking, problem-solving individuals. So basically, we need to set up the next generation for success. I'm a huge believer people succeed when they're set up for success. And when people fail, often it's not because they're just a lack of effort, it's because they're put into an unworkable situation. So this is my response to what needs to change to better prepare the next generation. Go play your games.
My name is Marianne Spatola. I am the founder and CEO of C3 Talent Strategies. What are my hopes for the future of work? COVID accelerated us into digital maturity, transforming the way we do business, our business models, the way we work, and our workforce. And so it's already here, and let's embrace it and let's make the most of it. What do we need to look at differently as we think about the future of work? What has changed? What does this new world look like? And I think there are three things that are irrevocably different in this new world of work. The first is we have to learn to lead in the moment. There is no playbook for crisis management. Leaders are being challenged with shifting priorities that change by the hour. Our goals have changed more rapidly than we've ever been able to keep up with before. And the second is master the art of the pivot. Because of the volatility of the environment that we're in and for the foreseeable future, learning how to make a pivot, learning how to experiment, learning how to try things on and be okay with not having perfection, but making progress. And the third is to recognize that the distributed workforce is here to stay. There have been many studies released recently about the return to work and how our percentage of remote workers is going to dramatically increase. People have found it to be effective, productive. We've myth busted all the things about remote work that we thought wouldn't work before. We can collaborate, we can innovate, and get a lot more done. And so those three things are here to stay, no matter what the new normal looks like.
This next one-on-one is going to be fun. John Hoover, he's an author of a pretty cool series of books, including not just How to Sell to an Idiot, which I'm excited about, but How to Work for an Idiot, Survive and Thrive Without Killing Your Boss. He was an executive for the Walt Disney Company. Some of you heard about that. PhD in Human and Organizational Systems, and his past has some pretty cool experiences along the way, including being a playwright and a screenwriter and an executive coach to businesses across the world. Please welcome John Hoover.
John, I'd love to hear just from you, your journey and your background briefly on what, I was on the website the other day, and it took me down a string and I was trying to decide between, do I buy How to Work for an Idiot or How to Sell to an Idiot? I was trying to figure out which book would be better for us for our team in this moment. So I'm excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you so much, Sam. It's fun to write the trilogy, How to Work for an Idiot, How to Sell to an Idiot, but the best book of the trilogy by far is How to Live with an Idiot. I have to give that to every woman I date to say, in case you're considering marriage, this is my instruction manual. Read it and memorize it. But you're absolutely right. How to Work for an Idiot. We have that up here?
Yep.
This is the confession, or I should say, this includes the confessions of a recovering idiot boss. So those are mostly my qualifications. When I was at Disney, I started out as a horrible, horrible boss. I was doing everything I could do according to what I've learned bosses should be based on what anybody who's from Iowa, as I am, knows about business, and that typically is learned from motion pictures and television. So I had just recently watched The Godfather, and I thought Mo Green was a great businessman. Now, probably a lot of your viewers don't know what The Godfather is or what it's about. It's an older movie, but let's put it this way: he was a gangster, and he liked to abuse people and manage by intimidation. So I won't drag you through all of the misgivings that I had about management, except to say that I learned pretty quickly on that management by intimidation was not a motivator. And so eventually I came around just through trial and error, because our leadership training in those days, and that was a few years ago, Ron Miller, this was pre-Michael Eisner, this was the Ron Miller era at Disney. We really didn't have the kind of succinct leadership training and development that you're doing now, Sam. And boy, if we had, we made a lot more progress. But we learned quickly that, people need to be engaged with. They need to know, as Teddy Roosevelt said years and years and years ago, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So take that whole business about being the smartest person in the room, wad it up and throw it away, because that's not going to impress anybody. The way to get people motivated is to know that you care about them and you want them to be plugged in and successful in the organization. The whole premise that you have for One Huddle is fantastic. I like it a lot because I've been preaching and teaching for years and years that the 3 P's, or P squared, of success in business is people, productivity, and profitability. And that starts with people. It's not profitability, performance, or productivity and people. It's people first. And that will guarantee all the rest come with it. And everybody from Jack Welch right on down the line understood that. And it worked so well and was proven successful again and again and again. So lest I go down some rabbit trail here, that's kind of where my qualifications came from. I grew up at Disney in management, learned my hard knocks at Disney, and from there went out and became actually a corporate filmmaker, and then a consultant, and then an executive coach, and worked with a guy named Mike Vance, who was Jack Welch's executive coach, and that was a great pleasure. I had the honor of ghostwriting a book for him called Think Outside the Box, and learned a lot from Mike and his partner Diane Deacon. So there's just a lot of learning going on along the way if you pay attention. And what you're doing seems to be at One Huddle kind of a compilation of that learning set against technology and the advances in technology that we're currently experiencing. And the gamification, am I right to use that word? We've been using it for a while. Gamification engages people where they are. And there's no other place to try and engage people when it comes to learning anything. I have taught over the years at Yale and Vanderbilt and Columbia, NYU, and learned as I've watched students grow. In other words, the classes that I've taught, date back far enough that you can see an evolution of students through the ages, so to speak. And there's never an exception that they need to be engaged, and they need to be engaged where they are so that they can find meaning in what they're doing. And that's what it's about, engaging the workforce.
And on that point, we, over the last few years, I got into my business by just being a sales manager, and I saw a problem and decided to start a company. And I joked that I just got really upset one day, and next thing you know, you're writing a business plan. But in the last few years, coming in and out of rooms with C-level executives and HR leaders, the word engagement you mentioned comes up a lot. And sometimes I wonder if the people using it inside of an enterprise are just it's repeating. They're parroting maybe something that is they know they should concern themselves with, but maybe don't necessarily know how to attack. I guess for the people listening that are C-level leaders or new managers, what would be the advice you have about how do you really, your definition or action steps on how to really engage a workforce?
Well, at the risk of being redundant, I go back to that word meaning. If something's not meaningful to someone, they're not going to become very invested in it. As you point out, a lot of people work, well, most people work probably, because they are not trust fund babies, and they need to have a career, and they need to support themselves, they need to support their young families. And the best way to do that is to have a well-paying job. Well, the best way to succeed in any job, no matter how well-paying it is to engage with people. And the best way to engage with people, and this is all Napoleon Hill. Well, again, your audience probably might not remember who Napoleon Hill was, but Napoleon Hill had this great concept that it's not about you, it's about them. It's about other people. So if you want to engage them, it's got to be about them. And that's a throwback to the Roosevelt concept. They don't care how smart you are, how brilliant and talented you are. until they know how much you care about them and who they are and what they have to offer. So tapping in, which I know some of your software does, into getting to know people, your peers, the people who are working around you and interacting with you in the workplace. Brilliant, because nobody's more interested with anybody in the world more than they're interested in themselves. So that was Napoleon Hill's idea, and you have simply taken that and brought it to life with brilliant digital contemporary technology.
Sure. Do you think from what do you have to say to the conversation around different generations in the workforce? There's so many managers I talk to who will say, everybody complains about the generation before. It feels Gen Z, millennial. My daughter's 3, so now I just found out the other day she's Gen Alpha. So I don't know if that means we're starting at the beginning somehow. I guess as anything, what's your perspective on that? Is there what should managers or leaders be aware of when they even start to consider generations when they engage their workers?
So you should have your daughter in management training by the time she's 4.
Yeah.
I joke with you. But your 3-year-old daughter can teach you the lessons. And I throw back to a very old book, Everything I Needed to Succeed in Life I Learned in Kindergarten, how to play well in the sandbox. Your 3-year-old can teach you what it takes to be a great leader. In other words, she's demanding. Most employees don't actually come out well. They might in this day and age with what's going on nationally, but a 3-year-old will demand your attention, not just request it, but will demand it as you're learning. This is the throwback to my marriage and family therapist days. And that's good, because what she's demanding is what she wants. She wants to be engaged, and she wants to be engaged where she is. She doesn't want to be engaged as an 18-year-old. She doesn't want to be engaged as a 12-year-old. She wants to be engaged as a 3-year-old, because the things that are important to a 3-year-old are different than those that are important to other generations. So managers have a golden opportunity, this isn't rocket science, to know that every generation in their age level wants to be engaged. And people, one of the principles that I teach and write about a lot in books like How to Work for an Idiot, are that people want to be known for who they are. It's very, very important to recognize people for who they are, not who you're the person you're trying to make them into. So the 3-year-old is saying, know me, treat me, approach me, reward me in ways that are meaningful and significant to me. Human beings are never not communicating, the double negative on purpose to emphasize the point that every generation and every human being, I don't care how old they are communicating to you constantly what's important to them. The way they write their emails, if you want to do the breakdown, and do a linguistic, media psychology analysis of how somebody writes and composes an email, their tone, their style, the syntactic parts of their sentences, clear down to what they're doing on their social media. They're telling you constantly what's important to them. So don't ignore it. Pay attention to that. They're giving you the roadmap free of charge to what they value. And so if you can deal with them and respond in how they value the world around them, how they value themselves, and most importantly, how they position themselves and place themselves in the world around them. And that information is all you need then to create a meaningful connection and interaction with those people. That doesn't mean that you sell out to everybody else's agenda. It just means that forewarned is forearmed. You know what they want. You know what's meaningful to them. You know then how you can interact with them, and you can use products like yours and those platforms to reach them, as we mentioned way back at the top of the interview, where they are, not where you want them to be, but where they are, considering who they are, not who you want them to become.
That's some take. You got me, John. Filled a few pages of notes already. I think it's super relevant. With what's happening right now with COVID and remote work, I guess continuing the same points you're making. How is that? What's your evaluation on it? The things that are good, the things that are bad, the things that are challenging. How do you? I know for me personally, as a manager we got about 40 team members. At a point there early on, I felt like I had to talk to everybody. All of a sudden I had 42-minute Zoom calls on my calendar every day. What's your perspectives on how remote work is going to shift or impact us?
Well, remote work is very consistent, particularly with younger generations and their styles that they're familiar with and their chosen preferred styles of communicating with each other, which is where One Huddle, falls in terrific alignment with what the communication patterns are. We can only be strong when everybody has a shot, right? Well, how does technology expand the opportunity to have a shot? When we're restricted to FaceTime, when we're restricted to physical interaction, which is good. Gestalt is a very important part of reading another individual and helping them to get to know you and read you. Comfort zones are so important because, as it is said, real development and growth only takes place once we step outside the comfort zone. If we stay inside the comfort zone, we're not going to grow, we're not going to develop. But so it's easier for people to get outside their comfort zones when they're dealing with each other virtually, oftentimes, than it is when you're physically sitting in the room with somebody. So my question to you, Sam, is who told you had to have 40-minute calls with everybody? Where did that idea come from? Did they all demand that from you?
No, I just thought I had to.
See, I stuck my neck out and took a risk there because, as lawyers say, you should always know the answer to the question before you ask it. But I had a strong sense that that's exactly what you were going to say, is that somewhere along the line that notion came up and you bought into it based on what information you had from your experience in life. And like I said, my experience includes being a colossal idiot boss. And so I learned to not do. I had to learn to undo some things that I had learned to do. But we have to be careful what we assume. Be careful what we assume, because like you have found out, I'm sure, and again, I don't know the answer to this question, but I'm going to assume, which is dangerous, that they didn't want a 40-minute call with you every day, that they could operate just fine with something less than that in terms of the amount or volume of contact they had. They want direction. That's true. I found that true, is that people don't want to be abandoned. They don't want to be ignored. They don't want to feel transparent. But how you engage them, the length of time with which you engage them, the amount of information that you exchange, again, has to meet them where they are and resonate with them. Disney got people engaged by immersing them in the culture. The culture was everything. And the people there knew that they were expected to be creative, they were expected to be innovative, and that was encouraged and it was rewarded. So to challenge people to be the best they could be, like consultant Peter Block taught us, you want the whole person to come to work. And there's no way the whole person is going to come to work if it's not a safe environment for them to be in. So that's a very circuitous way to answer your question. What about working in a distributed workforce versus working in a workplace? There are good points. There are advantages to each one of those models, no question about it. But there's again, the more important issue is how dynamically are you engaging your people and meeting them where they are and valuing what's important to them and honoring them for what they have to bring to work? I think that trumps. I think that is transcendent above whether or not you're going to be working together in the same room or you're going to be working around the world. As an executive coach, I coach people all over the world, like every continent in the world. And the biggest piece, I don't want to leave this out, Sam, because maybe, again, one of the very most important issues is to help people think critically. What I find we've lost the art of is critical thinking. People don't challenge things as they should. And that's one of the things I learned at Disney. Is one of the things that we need now more than ever. We need people not to just jump on a bandwagon, join a cause, get the card, learn the secret handshake. Think critically about everything and challenge. And managers need to be challenged. Corporate executives need to be challenged, not bullied, not painted into a corner and coerced into doing something that's not in the best interest of the corporation or the community itself, but to be challenged critically to justify what they're doing in terms of how many people can benefit, how many people can this help in a genuine, pervasive manner over time. What can we do to help the greatest number of people?
That's great, John. I think that the one thing I wrote down through a lot of what you shared was this, and it's always the simple stuff that's the hardest, but it's the concept of, what's meaningful to me right now.
Yes,
I think is a really powerful one. And I think as a manager and a leader, it might be coming from a place of you think you're trying to help an employee get somewhere, but maybe they don't want, maybe that's not where they want to go, or, but if you just focus on where they are right now, I think that's a really powerful message.
Pay attention to what they're saying to you. And if the person feels that you're all in for them in the workplace, again, doesn't matter if you're in the room or you're halfway around the world, they will take a bullet for you.
Absolutely. John, this has been awesome. I'm asking everybody one final question. So if you give me one more moment of your time on this one.
Okay.
What is your hope for the future of work?
That it become a more fulfilling human experience. And unfortunately, the weak link in that chain is management. Unfortunately, the weak link in that chain is management. And I think technology is going to play a big role in how we deal with that over time. But in How to Work for an Idiot book, I mentioned that concept called idiot aggregation. You wonder how many people get into such powerful positions. How do they garner such institutional authority when they obviously are so incompetent, right? And I don't have to sell anybody on that idea. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. And that's because organizations' compensation systems are broken, right? And I think technology can help us with this. I believe in something called the molecular organization, which we don't have time to get into now, but the rigid hierarchical, boxes, the organization chart, which I'm sure you've hated, and you've been in sales. And so as a person with sales experience, you understand that performance compensation is way different than calculated compensation, right? Based on industry standards. And there's a huge difference there. So in an organization, there are people spread out through the organization who got to where who have achieved what they've achieved in terms of their current position through no merit of their own, right? The Peter Principle. If people want to look up the Peter Principle, I used to know Larry Peter before he passed away, and he posited that people rise to a certain level of management and then get stuck in middle management forming this thick layer, callous layer that then nobody can penetrate, and productivity or their careers come, the career trajectory comes to a stop. Larry didn't live long enough to do the longitudinal research. The fact is, once a person who once came to work to do what he or she loved, who once came to work because they were excited about the work they were doing, once they exceed their level of competence, or I should say current competence, because competence can change, and that's what your business is all about at one huddle. Once they depart their competence or competence zone, that's when their career takes off like a rocket. Why? Because they stop spending their energy on doing the things they love, and they start spending their energy and resources on protecting themselves from being exposed as incompetent. We've all seen that happen. Nobody's going to go home to their spouse or significant other or partner and say, you know what, honey, I'm going to give up that raise. I'm going to give up those additional benefits. I'm going to give up those stock options because they promoted me outside of my level of competence. Of course, you're not going to do that. You want the kids to go to the school where you want them to go to school. You want the dog to have its braces. You want all those benefits of living where you want to live and doing what you want to do. So you have all these pods of incompetence where people have then created a cocoon of sycophants, right, that protect them from problems that they're not competent to deal with. So a problem comes to them, and the cocoon of sycophants deflect the problem away from them so they don't get exposed to their incompetence. Once in a while, a problem will penetrate the circle of sycophants, and lo and behold, they screw it up. They lose $15, $20 million for the company. How do companies typically deal with that? Because all the rest of them are playing the same game. They ask you to start firing your sacrificial lambs. And so the circle of sycophants has bodies, collateral damage, bloodshed, until they say that's enough. Just don't ever let it happen again. Over time, then, you have an organization peppered with incompetence, and nobody's dealing with it. And then, as always happens, somebody very near the top, if not at the top of the organization, gets hired away to go screw up another organization, or they get indicted, or for some reason there's a vacuum created at the top of the organization. And that loud sucking sound you hear, to quote Ross Perot, is all of the positive incompetence being sucked up. One more layer in the organization. So somebody who was an incompetent manager becomes an incompetent senior manager. Somebody who's an incompetent director is now an incompetent senior director. Somebody who's an incompetent vice president is now an incompetent senior vice president through no achievement of their own, but simply because the organization abhors a vacuum and they have to backfill everything. Right? So that's how we end up institutionalizing incompetence. I don't mean incompetence as incompetent people. I mean incompetence as in people not qualified to do what they do. So to be perfectly honest with you, the executive coaching business thrives on this aggregation of idiots, so to speak, of people who are not competent to do what they can do. Now, the good news about that is people like Sam Caucci, I hope I pronounced that right, Sam Caucci, can come along with one huddle, and they can start to deal with those things in a way that's relevant and meaningful to the people who need to expand their competence. You can help recognize it faster because of your technology, and you can help deal with it in a less confrontational, less threatening way because of your platform and the model that you're using. That's the good news. We don't have to live in the old Archie Bunker world of institutionalizing incompetence. We don't have to do it that way anymore. And believe me, nobody's immune to that. Whether it's a for-profit corporation, whether it's an academic institution where, the old tenure model reigns supreme, or a union collective bargaining arrangement where seniority is the only thing that matters, we can deal with that in a much more reactive, reflective, meaningful way by the use of technology. And not just the use of technology, but the enlightened, and that's where I'm going to put you in one huddle, I'm going to call you an enlightened use of technology and meeting people where they are and creating a more meaningful, dynamic, effective, and efficient means of engaging people. How about that?
Well, John, I appreciate you spending so much time with me, and I took 3 pages of notes here, and I'm definitely going to pull the trigger on a few of those books this evening. So I appreciate you taking the time and sharing. Super timely, super important. So thank you.
You are welcome, and all the best of luck with you. You're working with some really fantastic people, like I said.
Hi, my name is Scott Hayward, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at GMO. The question I'm answering is, what can we do better in the future of work? First, seek diversity. Diverse teams produce better solutions and ultimately deliver better results. With a diverse set of lenses, you can see more facets of the problem you are trying to solve, and therefore build a more effective solution. At GMO, we are proud to partner with organizations such as Girls Who Invest and Include in order to support the goal of increasing the number of women and diverse candidates in portfolio management, technology, and executive leadership in the asset management industry. I would encourage companies to seek out similar organizations to engage with in order to reap the benefits of a workforce comprised of many different lenses, backgrounds, voices, and experiences. Second, anticipate. Organizations must anticipate generational shifts in future talent pool skills. Many of those entering the workforce now were born into a digital world. Their communication style and expectations around work culture are unlike the generations that came before them. Their motivators are different, and when thinking about where they'd like to work, purpose is often at the forefront of their mind. It's common for many of the young candidates we meet to ask about our sustainability and diversity efforts, and what we as an organization are doing to help in these areas. Many are looking for flexibility and feel what matters is the end result instead of where or during what hours their work is getting done. Third, be flexible. The COVID-19 pandemic has acted as an accelerant in forcing organizations to operate more flexibly, at least with regard to physical location. This new shift enables management to draw from broader and more diverse talent pools and has presented the opportunity to consider and be creative with other forms of flexible work arrangements, such as job shares, flex hours, and part-time work. Assessing an individual employee's needs and prioritizing a flexible arrangement when feasible will not only help to drive employee engagement, but will also help to attract and retain future talent. Thank you.
My name is Joey Buccino, and I'm a teacher of English language and literature at the United Nations International School in New York City. As a teacher, I think a lot about the future of work because I think a lot of folks perceive education now not simply as learning facts and figures, but acquiring those skills and experiences that you need for the workplace. As an English teacher, I still do teach literature and books and all that fun stuff, but I've also tried to reframe the English class as the place where you learn how to read, negotiate, interpret, and create content across multiple medias and platforms. I think the fundamental skill of being able to see a piece of content on social media, in the news, on TV, wherever, and whatever it may be, and be able to understand it, evaluate it, and if needed, emulate it and find inspiration from it, that sort of information literacy and comfort with engaging critically with the world, I think that's what we need to be emphasizing, especially now with, misinformation and oversimplification and all that. I think the next generation of workers needs to be a generation of not only critical thinkers, but critical creators as well, with an ability to produce and operate across a variety of platforms and on a variety of subjects. In my field alone, teachers are asked to do so many things on so many topics, and now that we've been in quarantine for a little while, across digital and in-person platforms. I'm fortunate that my hobbies allowed me to have experience audio editing and video editing and working with these digital platforms, but imagine if I had had formal opportunities to learn those skills. And imagine if our education was truly interdisciplinary and not as compartmentalized and tracked. I think what the future of work really demands is that sense of diversity. Not only diversity in terms of the skill set that future workers are going to need, but obviously also the diversity of perspectives too, but that's a whole nother conversation.
So this next session is going to be led by Jared Center, Director of Customer Success at One Huddle. He's going to be joining Cornell Thomas. Cornell is an international motivational speaker, 4-time author, 2-time podcast host. He's a former basketball player and has some really awesome experiences, including running an executive coaching program for CEOs that focuses on EQ, team building, and culture, all critical elements of future of work. Please welcome Cornell Thomas and Jared Center.
All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to be here for another one-on-one session for Compete, a live event on the future of work. And for this session, I'm here with none other than Cornell Thomas. Cornell, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So for everyone who doesn't know, Cornell is a lot of things. A former athlete, speaker, coach, author, thinker, and as he says, more importantly, a husband and father. So Cornell, why don't we start off, tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a former athlete. I started playing basketball when I was 16 years old. I always tell people when I'm interviewed, who I am today is a direct link to who my mom was and is as I was growing up. My father passed away when I was very young, when I was 4 years old. He's a police officer in the city of Passaic, New Jersey, did all these great things. But when he passed away, my mom raised 5 of us by herself with no money. So I got to see firsthand what like hard work and grit and determination was all about. She has a very strong faith. And I just kind of followed her path. My mom didn't really preach to us as much in terms of, do this, do that, do that. I just watched her actions. So the reason I'm a psychopath now in terms of how hard I work is because my mom had to do what she had to do to make sure that we could survive. So I picked up basketball at 16 years old. I was god awful at it, terrible. But the one thing I had was work ethic. So 6 hours, 7 hours a day. I just trained basketball. Then eventually after like 5-6 years, I ended up getting a full ride to go to North Dakota and play, and then get a contract to play professional basketball. And then I ruptured my Achilles tendon a week before I was supposed to go. So if it wasn't for how I was brought up, my mom has always said everything happens for a reason. Since I was 6 years old, I remember her telling us that. And sometimes you don't know what that reason is when you're in the midst of adversity. Like when you're in the midst of the storm, you're not like, everything happens for a reason. Like I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking, I'm a week away from playing professional basketball. The only reason that I really care so much, not just the basketball, was I want to make sure my mom didn't have to struggle anymore financially. So I want to be able to give her money. So I felt like a failure. I was in like complete why me mode. And then I just realized, I said, hey, see, like this is going to get better. You're a solution-oriented person. What are you going to do next? And so I just got out of why me mode, got into what now mode, and just started working my butt off to get back. And then I got an opportunity to coach basketball. And right before my son was born, after like 12 years of coaching basketball, I just started feeling this like shift that there was something else in life. And it was scary because once we have determined in our mind that this is our path, and then all of a sudden your path you don't have the same draw to it that you did before, you're like, well, what's next? So people ask me all the time, how'd you get into speaking? Did you go to so-and-so's coaching program or blah? I'm like, no, I didn't do any of that crap. Like what I did was I was on Facebook one day and I was reading my timeline and it was ultra negative, as sometimes it tends to be. And I had a book of positive quotes and I started putting quotes from the book online. And people started to like it. So I'm like, cool. And then one day I woke up and I couldn't find the book. And I made my own quote. And people still liked it. So I'm like, well, screw the book. I'm going to make my own quote. And then after a while, a friend of mine, my friend Steph, came up to me and she goes, where do you get your quotes from? I said, I make them up myself. And she goes, that's awesome. You should write a blog. I was like, that's a great idea. What the hell is a blog? I opened a blog. So she opened up a WordPress site and I started writing a blog called The Power of Positivity every Saturday. And then the blogs became books. And then the books, after the first book, I wanted to share my story. So I just started literally speaking in front of 2 people, 5 people, myself. It didn't matter. Just speaking all over the place. And it caught on.
Yeah, I love it. I'm really excited for you to share your story today with everybody. And obviously, the event is about the future of work. And I think that your perspective is going to be great on this because you speak to all different types of people all over the world. And you probably heard this phrase future of work a lot. It's almost become kind of almost like a buzz phrase in a lot of ways. And obviously with this event, we want to try to start defining it and thinking about like what we can do to get ready and prepare for it. So again, when you think of that phrase future of work, what comes to mind? What are some of the things you think about?
I think of pivoting immediately, like pivoting. That's what I think of, because the future of work can change in a second, as we've seen now with COVID and all this other stuff.
We're here. It's here. Yeah.
We're here, right? Like we're on a Zoom call. We're not face to face. We're not sitting down having a meeting. The future of work can change in an instant. It took 6 days for the work to absolutely completely change. So if you don't have the ability to pivot, if you don't have the ability to take that haymaker from life and then say, okay, I got to get myself up. I might be on wobbly legs, but now I got to find my way. There's going to be all sorts of problems. You're seeing it in companies, corporations, people as individuals. They're like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So while I'm planning, like I know I have years planned out, but I'm really also focused on today. And I'm also focused on, well, when the next storm comes, because trust me, it's going to come, right? That's just how life is. When the next storm comes, will I be able to see it first off and then make the appropriate move? I always tell people, like, when you're in the water swimming and you hear thunder, people don't move. And then all of a sudden lightning comes. You're like, damn, people's, picnic baskets are getting rained on and they're, picking their kids up running for shelter. Well, thunder told you that the storm was coming. Like thunder said, hey, dummy, I'm coming and I'm coming strong, right?
Yep.
But we don't move. We stay in our tracks. So it's very important to understand the thunder. When the COVID thing first came out, the first week I was flying back from Austin, Texas, just spoke in Austin, Texas. And on my way back home, I was saying to myself, what are you going to create when you land? I didn't do this app I wanted to do. Okay, let's get on that. 5th book, let's get on that. Okay, Positivity Summit virtually, let's get on that. So I started immediately because again, that's the way I was brought up, shift, pivot. So I started pivoting. And now I think more people are realizing there's no stability when you don't, even if you work for yourself, there's still no stability. You don't know, I go out and speak. I'm not going on planes right now, right? So
right.
You just have to be ready to pivot. You have to be ready to adapt to what's coming, because it's coming.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, speaking to whether it's business leaders, nonprofits, children in schools, I mean, you're speaking to a lot of people. So when you're talking about pivoting and the fact that we really need to adapt our mindset and change our mindset like that, what are some of the things that you're hearing from people, whether it's in business, nonprofits, government, whatever it is? What are some of the things you're hearing about what people are actually doing? Because I feel like there's so much noise going on right now about what we should be doing in order to prepare for the future of work. What are some of the things that you're hearing that people actually are doing to kind of make sure that they're ready?
Well, one of the best things that I'm hearing is people that are taking it half a step at a time, not even one step at a time. They're saying, okay, what are the baby steps I can take to start transitioning my business to this new future of work, to this new frontier that we're going to? And it could be, okay, let me start getting myself proficient with Zoom or GoToMeeting, whatever it is. It could be, let me go through my resources, right, and see who is in my field and who I can collaborate with. I've collaborated with so many people in the last 60 days. Hey, man, would you want to jump on my online workshop? And I'll jump, no problem, let's do it, right? So I think the main thing is understanding if you have breath in your body, you're okay. You're okay. I know it seems like you're not. But the first thing you have to realize, if you get an opportunity to wake up, you're okay. Now you can start taking the baby steps. And don't compare your baby steps with someone else's long stride. That's what companies do all the time, and that's where they end up going under. They end up imploding because they're like, well, this person in my field is doing this. I train kids for basketball, and we were supposed to have a season. And I'll never stop working with kids because I love it. So I'm like, okay, I can't see these kids in the gym. And my wife is like, well, what are you going to do? I said, okay, well, I'm going to get a basketball. I'm going to set my computer up and we're going to do Zoom workouts.
There you go.
We just start doing Zoom workouts. And I can't touch the kids, but the energy's there. And what do the parents do? They write me and they're like, Cornell, you have no idea how cool this is for the kids. It brings some normalcy to their schedule. They're stressed out. They don't have prom. They don't have spring sports. And then for 45 minutes, they get to hang out with you and do Zoom workouts, right? That's what I mean by baby steps. We're not full out having practices, but for them to get a ball in their hand and see their coach and work on stuff, and I can talk to them and have, that's what you do. You just, you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm good. And then you're like, all right, what's the first small step that I can take towards transitioning out? And a lot of times it's just sitting down and writing down, all right, where can I go? What can I do? You know, people write vision boards or whatever. I have an action board. My action board, on my board, it says things like create, you know, like, do, like, it's all do things. It's not like, in years, I want to fly with butterflies and blah. Like, it's like, come on, bro.
Yeah.
Like, it's got to be action. Like, what are you doing today? What are you doing tomorrow?
Right. I love it. I love it. And I think that you were talking about kids in basketball practice. And I mentioned before, I know you speak in schools too. Obviously, when we talk about the future of work and like preparing our workforce, it starts with kids. Yeah. And we were just talking right before we jumped on here about how in, you know, a typical world pre-COVID that, you know, kids are in school the majority of the day. They have them for the majority of the day. So when you think about the educational system, what role, Cornell, do you feel like the educational system plays in ensuring that our young people today are ready for the jobs of tomorrow?
I'll be honest with you, and no offense to any educators, I don't think they're doing a good job. We're learning the same crap that I learned when I was in high school. My mom learned when she was in high school, and her mom probably learned when she was in high school. We're not preparing them the right way. We're not telling them, hey, AI is something real. VR is something real. Like, these things are happening. Your iPhone is a freaking computer. You could run a business through your phone, right? Like, we're not preparing them this way. Now you see colleges that they're offering gaming majors, right? Because kids are like, there's gamers and blah, 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 stuff that's unheard of. Imagine when I was little, someone saying, hey, Cornell, you can take a Super Mario Brother class, right? Like, I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? So I don't think they're doing a good job preparing them in terms of there are not enough electives that say, hey, you know what? Maybe you might not be the traditional student that works for someone. Maybe you want to run your own business, right? Maybe you want to create something. So we need to start having more entrepreneurial classes. We need to start having more classes in terms of boosting kids' confidence in their mindset. You have kids these days that are feeling like, because of social media pressures, etc., feeling there's so many pressures in the world, they don't want to be here anymore. Well, what are we doing? Because we're not building this. We got to build this. It's not just about home economics. It's not just about dates in a history book, right? It's about like, no, let's empower these kids and let them know like everything is possible in 2020. Everything. You guys the world is your oyster for real. Back in the 50s, 60s, you couldn't really say that to everybody. Right. Now it's like, man, technology-wise, the world is your oyster. So we have to start throwing that stuff into the high schools. When I go to high schools, I talk to kids about, you know, mindset and gratitude and like, you know, being strong, like believing in yourself and not following. And then if you don't want to work for someone, don't work. I knew at 6th grade, I didn't want to work for someone. I knew that in 6th grade. That doesn't mean that's for everybody, but I knew for me. Sure. So you can't just generalize a whole group of students and say, okay, everybody wants to work for someone and everyone's going to flourish under someone, because there's some of us that don't.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is that our educational system in schools really need to take a look in the mirror and think about the jobs of tomorrow, and is what we're teaching enough, adequate enough for, you know, our kids today to prepare them, because it's going to be different from when we were in school.
100%.
Right. I know. So when you're talking, we were just talking about this before too, with Bryce and I, with your kids, what are, besides what you just said, I'm sure you keep a couple secrets for them. When you're talking to them about their action boards, or your action board as a father for them, what are some of the things that you talk to them about to make sure that they're ready for the future of work, and for they're young, they're not working yet necessarily, but work can mean a lot of things, right?
Yeah. So Bryce said something to me like a month ago, and it really, I've never had anyone say this to me before. You know, I didn't grow up with a father. My dad never got a chance to say this to me. He comes out the shower, and me and Bryce, we have these like talks, right? Like I'm sitting in the bathroom with him, and I put on his pajamas and have this talk, and he goes, Daddy, I want to be just like you, right? Like he literally like, I want to be just like you. I look at him, and I said, I said, thank you for that. I received that. I appreciate it. But you're going to be a lot better than me. So you're going to be way better than Daddy is. And he looked at me. He was like shocked, right? I said, you'll be way better than Daddy is. I said, because Bryce, my job as a dad is to make sure that you are better than me, right? You're the updated version. You're the upgraded version of Daddy. Just like your kids are going to be the upgraded version of you. So for me, it's just planting the seed in their head of greatness. Think about you when you were in high school. how many times someone grab you and say, hey, you can be freaking great?
Mm.
This is how many times someone said that to me in high school.
Yeah.
0 times. I never had a teacher pull me aside and say, look, there's greatness inside of you. You could be great. It has to start there. Future of work, etc. All of it has to start with you. So for me, I have to plant seeds in my kids' heads now that as great as you think daddy's is and mommy, awesome, you're going to be even better.
Mm.
So that's the first. I've never had a teacher tell me that I could be great, ever. I never did. I only had one coach that told me in my whole career, hey, son, you could be great. And it changed everything. I was like, really? I could be great? Oh, you walk different. You put your shoulders back, right? You're like, I can be great. You start believing in it. So I think when you have little ones, all the way through their lives, I don't go a day without telling my kids, there's greatness inside of you. You can be great. You can be phenomenal. Mm. And you gotta, every single day, you gotta plant that seed in your kid's head. If you want your kids to accomplish great things, every single day I plant that in my kids' head.
I love it. I personally think that we should probably do another session just on parenting, which would be great. Maybe that'll be our next event, because I love that. That's great stuff. And honestly, it applies for everybody. When you talk about, whether it's employees, team members, colleagues, like everybody likes to be appreciated and needs to be appreciated, right?
I do HR events, and you know what we talk about? We talk about culture. We talk about treating people as human beings. That's what we talk about when I do these HR events. We talk about empowering your employees. We talk about not micromanaging. We talk about respecting one another. These are the things we talk. It's the same thing I talk about with my kids, the kids I coach. It's the same stuff that now HR companies are saying, oh, wait a second. Maybe we should treat our employees nice. Maybe we should empower them. Maybe we should tell them that we believe in them. It's the same thing.
Principles.
It's the same principles. We grow up wanting that pat on the back, wanting that sticker like, hey, you're doing a good job. Not every day, but when you get that sticker every once in a while, that scratch and sniff that says great job, you're like, oh, I want to do good on my next test. I want to get another sticker. So it doesn't change. The principles stay the same.
Absolutely. So we you have a couple more minutes here, and so I think a great question to kind of wrap things up, because you talked about some of the companies you work with, you talked about kids you've worked with, talked about schools a little bit. If you were in a room, Cornell, with people, we have some kids from school, you have maybe the school board, you have some C-level people, and you're talking about what the future of work is going to be like, what tomorrow is going to be like, and you're making an action board with everybody like you talked about, what are a couple things that you say, all right, here are some of the things that are missing right now. Here are some of the things that we need to not just think about, but we need to do starting today.
I would go to the board with my dry erase marker, and I would write out UBUNTU, Ubuntu. Now, what Ubuntu means is I am because we are. It's a South African phrase. The future of work is teamwork and collaboration. I am because we are, which means if me and you are from the same village and you are absolutely crushing it and I am doing terrible, then we're both failing. That is the future of work, ladies and gentlemen. The future of work is, who are you bringing up the mountain with you? Or are you going to go up by yourself and put your hands up and not worry about anybody else? And if you cannot be a Sherpa in this world today in 2020, if you cannot bring people with you, your business will fail. You will fail in life. So it's all about Ubuntu for me. One of my favorite African sayings is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Okay? Yeah. Every day, I want to go far with individuals like yourself and what you guys are doing. I want to go as far as possible. So I want to bring people up with me. So Ubuntu.
I love it. Well, I think those are all the questions that I had. Before we wrap, Cornell, any parting words? I mean, that was great. And any other parting words for our attendees or things we didn't chat about today?
Yeah, I would just say this. You probably have people in your inner circle and your resources that are amazing to brainstorm with. Brainstorm with those people on a daily basis. Like yesterday, I had 4 conversations with 4 different groups of my friends. And the energy that I felt, right? We didn't talk about COVID. We didn't talk about politics. We didn't talk about anything. We just shared ideas and created. Now, if your inner circle doesn't have any creatives, your inner circle has no one that is positive, no one that can pour into you and lift you up, then your circle is filled with squares. You have the wrong pieces in your circle, right? Find better pieces. I tell people all the time, like if your people in your life don't lift you up, find better pieces. Not saying get rid of them. Don't say, hey, mom, I'm never going to talk to you again. You're negative. You just got to find better pieces. So that's what I would say. Like, look to your left and to your right and see who's around you. And if they lift you up and propel each other, have these conversations. If not, find people. This is the first time me and you were talking. I felt like I've known you for years.
Yep.
Right? So it's like, we're out there. We're just look for it. Look for those people that lift you up.
I love it. Well, Cornell, I really appreciate your time today and for joining us. I think it's going to be extremely powerful for all our attendees who are watching today and who will be watching after today as well. I know for me, talking about teamwork and collaboration and making sure that we're not just thinking about ourselves, but we're thinking about everybody else and how we can make that impact to make sure that we're all ready and we're all providing those kind of opportunities for everybody when it comes to the future of work. So really appreciate it. Thanks again, Cornell. We'll talk soon. All right.
Yes, sir. Thanks, brother.
This is Dr. Lauren Gallagher. I am a school psychologist and mental fitness coach for Sync It Up Sports. What needs to change in order to better prepare our future generation of workers? The first thing we need to do is we need to stop focusing so much on results and start focusing on the process. We have been educating kids to take tests, get good grades, get good test scores so they can go to good colleges. And there are many that can't do much more than that. So we need to start boosting the other, what used to be considered soft skills that are not so soft in my opinion. To me, they're the most important skills, and they come with boosting mental fitness. Some of those areas that we can start developing are our workers' ability to be a good teammate. Simple as that. Being able to develop the perspective-taking skills, being able to understand the value in involving more people helps organizations evolve and helps everybody stay focused on the organization's higher mission. Put egos aside, bring people together, be able to facilitate good conversations that engage different perspectives and solve problems through that process. The next thing we need to start developing is the mindsets of our workers. Growth mindsets are simply a desire to keep learning and growing. That's what we want our future workers to have. We want them to not get stuck because they don't have a set amount of skill. We need them to have curiosity and a desire to keep learning. And if they have that, they will find the way to keep learning and to find creative solutions. Which brings me to my next character skill, which is innovation. We need to develop workers who have the ability to use their imaginations and to be creative. And they have to have the tools to be able to foster that creativity. Imagination is the seed, right, to the next big thing that doesn't exist yet. But you have to have the creativity and imagination to be able to bring that about. Finally, one of the most important character skills our future workers can have is resilience. We have been shown time and time again that things do not stay the same, right? So we need to be able to face adversity. This situation we're in right now has shown that more than anything. We need to be able to adapt and pivot and bounce back and get creative. So to do that, we need to build resilience. So if we can do all that, boosting the mental fitness of our future generation of workers, we will have people that will be able to sustain and create and move their companies forward in a highly successful way, no matter what adversity comes their way.
Our next session's got some more folks with some Newark roots. Ken Warman, he's the founder and leadership consultant and executive coach at The Leader's Evolution. Prior to starting his company, Ken was the former head of workplace solutions at Prudential. He spent 13 years with Prudential and did a ton of work locally at Seton Hall University as a leadership advisor on their advisory council and facilitator of their workshop series. I'm excited to talk about future of work with Ken Warman.
I'd love to just start out by getting your point of view on how has work changed? How do you think work has changed over your time in the workforce?
Yeah, well, certainly with the adoption of technology, the work that we all do changes rapidly, and part of our growth is really adapting to that change and figuring out, well, what got me here, what got me to this point of success, and how am I going to be successful going forward? For me and my personal journey, a lot of that was around how to build high-performing teams, how to lead others. I've actually done a number of different roles, a number of different pieces of work. I started out as much more of a technical resource in financial services. I have my CPA, my CFA, but over the period of my career, I evolved and I grew and I learned new skills and really found that as I traversed my career, I got even more fulfillment out of being a strong leader, being a strong team builder. And so for me, that was sort of how my journey played out. And I think currently, I know the topic of our overall session here is around, sort of the future of work and how we're anticipating that. I think that same aspect of evolution, how do we change? I purposely called my company the Leader's Evolution, because I feel like we're all on a journey of learning, of growing, of developing. And now that evolution is happening quicker and quicker, at least the need to evolve, I think, is happening quicker and quicker, and we have to be up to that challenge. So
that's great. How would you say we're doing when it comes to preparing for future of work, whether it be from your time at Prudential or to now as you work with a bunch of companies? How do you think we're doing?
Yeah, I think it's varied. I think that one of the things I've discovered a lot as I've coached and learned various industries is there's a really great opportunity to take advantage of the drive that people have around their purpose. And oftentimes when I find an organization or an individual that's sort of struggling, there tends to be this disconnect between they're working in a field or they're doing something where they're just not motivated by it anymore, where it's not aligned to their purpose. And so as I think about the opportunity ahead and how we can get better, one of the vast areas you and I both know, there are some significant challenges in the world right now, some really big problems. And you don't have to look very far to see that. So how do we better align people's strengths, people's gifts as they are today towards like what they want to fix, what challenge they want to take on? I found that if you can do that, you get tremendous discretionary effort from people. You get high level of motivation, and they will naturally become more engaged, more fulfilled in what they're doing. It's really this alignment around following people's passion, doing what they love. It creates an undeniable force. And I do feel like the companies that do that best, the companies that are willing to adapt, to change, into that environment and align that and help the employee align, they're going to be the winners. They're going to be the ones that grow. They're going to be the ones that are sort of the champions of tomorrow. Companies or leaders that are resistant to doing that, or they're just not comfortable with doing it, or they don't have the adaptive ability to do it, that's where the challenge is going to come in. They're going to struggle. People are going to leave those organizations, and eventually I think those will not be the winners of tomorrow.
I think I read in one of your something you were quoted in that I'd read or listened to, maybe one of the podcasts you were on. You had made a comment that I think it was either 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 employees are engaged at work. We're just talking about the overwhelming percent of workers who are disengaged. Why, and what can you actually do? What is something that somebody can do today to start to get their business back on the right track when it comes to workforce engagement?
Yeah, it is a stat. Fairly certain it came from a Deloitte study that was done 4 or 5 years ago. But yeah, the numbers are somewhat staggering in terms of the people that are really truly and fully engaged. And what that means is they're not really giving their best ideas. They're not giving their discretionary effort. They're not working. I'm a former athlete, and to be able to win, you need the best coming from every single person on your team, right? And so if only 1 out of the 7 players that you have on the field is really truly engaged, I don't know, that's a sporting event I don't want to get into, Sam, because we're probably going to lose, right? What can people do? The place where I really focus, number one, is that is a leadership challenge, right? If I'm running a team and I only have 1 out of 7 people fully all in, giving me their best ideas, giving me their best effort, I've got to look within and I've got to say, what can I do differently from a leadership perspective to engage this group? Something's awry, something's amiss. And I think that part of that, as I would take that to sort of the next level, is really understanding who is it that I have on my team? How are they wired? What motivates them? What truly engages them? And being able to sort of like tailor my approach or being able to tailor the way that we work so that they are fully engaged, right? And that takes some level of flexibility. And I think leaders today have to be much more flexible, much more able to flex across a number of different styles. This notion of just like one way as to approach a team or a problem is, of days past. They're not of today, and they're really not of the teams of the future. And so really looking within and saying, how is that leader becoming a catalyst for that group, that team that they're trying to lead, to draw them into the fray, to draw out, their best contributions. And by the way, our goal is actually like 7 out of 7 of those individuals, not just 2, not just 3. That's just incremental benefit. We're looking for transformational growth. And if we want to solve the big, complicated, hairy problems that are in our face today, we got to get the best out of everybody, every single person. So 7 out of 7 is our goal. And if we take the right leadership approach, we can achieve that.
Yeah, me personally, I feel like it's definitely gotten harder in this COVID moment to go from being a workforce where you went to the same place every day and you saw each other every day and you got to, connect in these little in-between moments every day. Now that we're working from our living rooms, it's tough to manufacture those moments that, everything turns into an organized Zoom call. It just makes me wonder, are there coaching opportunities that are being missed, and how do we make them up if you're a leader?
Yeah, it's actually one of the areas that I've been focused most on the last 3 or 4 months, Sam, as you would imagine. And yes, leading a team in sort of our old environment and leading our team in our existing, much more virtual environment, there are foundational elements which are the same, right? If you ask me what's the most important element, I would say, well, it was very important that we establish trust. And that was 10 years ago, it was 10 months ago, it was 10 weeks ago, and it's today, and it's going to be going forward, right? You want to build a high-performing team, you've got to get people trusting each other. So those foundational elements are the same, but the manner in which we do that has actually changed. And you described a key element. One of the things important about virtual teams is, how do I get people to do what I need them to do or what I want them to do, even when I'm not watching, right? In our old environment, when we're all on the same floor, I could walk out and sort of like walk the halls or look into the cubes or look into the offices, wherever my workspace was. And people would know that like that was my way to just engage with people, to get context, to drive maybe some behaviors. Now that's non-existent. And actually, I think that's one of the structural systemic things that's going to change forever. I think we're in at least some element of hybrid, virtual model going forward, probably in many industries forever. And so we have to build up like a different muscle memory, a different way of achieving some of those same virtues, right? How do I get my team to trust me? Well, to start, one of the things that I've encouraged the folks that I'm coaching and some of the organizations that I'm leading is, you got to do that daily check-in, whether it's a team huddle at the beginning of the day, sort of an agile, construct where we talk and brainstorm about what's going on. To me, it's a best practice that a leader should be doing with their team. And we need to create other environments. Maybe it's just the casual check-in, and we have to be very intentional about it. How do I just get that social contextual interaction with some of my teammates? Sometimes we have a sense around that. Many of us is like, wow, that individual, Sam's a little aloof. I haven't heard from him for a couple of days. in the old environment, yeah, I would walk by and see Sam or maybe ask him to lunch. Can't do that right now, but I can engage with them and just almost do like a little pop-up Zoom, text you and say, hey, you have 5 minutes, let's just chat, let's connect. I want to see how you're doing. Takes a little bit more effort, and it's just a new way that a leader or a manager can operate, but really, really critical in terms of creating a successful environment for your team.
Yeah. Do you think that there are any leadership behaviors or skills or habits that are overvalued that we continue to emphasize as being, to the young sales rep that becomes the best seller and is now the manager? Like, are there any leadership qualities that you think we continue to emphasize that, in your opinion, are overvalued?
Yeah, and I'll also focus on what I feel people should value more. But yeah, I mean, at some level, right, we've seen over the last 10, 15, 20 years how the ability to use technology, the ability to use machines in calculations and other analysis, right, has just like exponentially grown. And therefore, to me, a lot of like the core attributes around financial analysis, being able to model, being able to develop, are they still important? The answer is yes, but I see them more as like table stakes. As you excel and evolve up to a leadership level, that's going to be sort of table stakes and what's expected to get to the table. Where I feel like there's skills that are undervalued in the environment that we're going, if I could talk to leaders of businesses, owners, managers, and say, hey, I want to buy a future in this, it would be around emotional intelligence. Would be the first thing off my list. Emotional intelligence being the ability to have self-awareness, to really understand how to connect with other people. There's going to be a premium on that skill in the environment that we're going. And it seems counterintuitive. It seems, but wait a minute, we've got machines to be able to calculate things and we're relying much more on technology. But then the leadership attribute of being able to build followership, to being able to connect with people is that much more of a differentiator, that much more important. So emotional intelligence would be a place I would really encourage people to focus, to coach, to teach around it. Second thing would be to hire adaptable learners, people that are really adaptable and don't just think that they can build up a knowledge in a particular area and that's it. They have a growth mindset of doing lots of different things across their career, taking on lots of different challenges. The more adaptable learners are going to be the ones that are really, really successful and ultimately become, the people that win and prevail and are the best leaders in the future. And then, there's this notion of sort of like grit, resiliency, and people that are really purpose-driven. I think that is a huge differentiator. It's a place, again, where I would encourage people to buy a future in that. Now, it's harder to assess a bit in an interview process, but you can get there if you know the right questions to ask, if you can look at the pattern of someone that actually has dealt with failure, that has pulled themselves up, across difficulty to be able to find a path. Those are the people that I'm going to want on my team. And that's how I encourage business owners, even young people. Where should I focus? Those three things that I just mentioned, I think that those are really going to be differentiators of the future and where I would expect people to invest, to coach, to learn the most.
Sure. I talked to a few managers I've talked to about this topic of productivity. Like, do we think that since we're working from home, are our workers more productive? Are they less productive? And I constantly hear this sort of risk of burnout is always a topic about the employee, but I feel like there's a major risk of burnout for managers and coaches today who are trying to stretch. Some are really well intended. They're trying to stretch themselves. They're trying to connect with everybody. They're doing the daily check-ins. Like, any advice to that group on how to tackle that in a way that they don't burn themselves out, they get the most out of their people, and it's something that's sustainable?
Yeah, my advice would be frequent and short interactions that are rich, that are meaningful. I think the way, especially when we dealt with this initial COVID situation that quickly sent, all forms of work completely virtual, the knee-jerk response was people were telling me, well, God, like, it's just like everybody is trying to create a 1 hour Zoom call for just about any topic, right? And what I was hearing from leaders in lots of different industries is, I wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, I go Zoom call after Zoom call after Zoom call for the entirety of the day. And then at like 6 or 6:30, it ends. And I've sort of got this like glaze on my face and I don't even know what happened. The connection over technology is important for us to get right. But if we overexert ourselves and we literally just fill our day with 1 hour Zoom calls, my sense is we will feel like a failure. We won't be making the real connections. My advice would be, shorter, quicker bursts of, hey, let's have a 10, 15-minute discussion. Let me just check in on you. Let me see how you're doing on that area of work, Sam, and have like a real meaningful engagement with that individual. Part of it in the situation that we're in now, dealing with the fear over COVID, the fear over the financial markets and the economy, the uneasiness and anxiousness around, the social injustice that people are standing up and saying we won't tolerate anymore, that creates a tremendous amount of anxiety. At some level, it's just connecting with people and seeing how they're doing and making that connection, but doing it in a real authentic, meaningful way that comes across to them as a trust building, deepening of the relationship. The more that you can focus your efforts around that, the better off you'll be. And then the reality of it is, just like any type of management challenge, it's where can I exert energy and time so that I can get in essence, a multiplier effect, right? Like that I can dedicate a half hour, but in essence get 10 times that effect from my team or in a result. Figuring those aspects out, it may be different in the environment that we're in now, but going through that thoughtful, intentional reflection upon that. And oftentimes that's where I love coaching, being able to talk that out with someone, being able to have someone ask me questions so that I can discover like what those things are that I should be doing differently. To me, that's the great value and benefit that comes out of coaching. And I think more and more people should be doing that right now to be able to get the most out of their teams and to be able to adapt and pivot.
As you look at younger people who are maybe coming out of college right now, or are maybe getting ready for their first job, and that first job might be remote, like any advice to that group? And I think this is important for any manager out there that's listening as well, because I think that they should have this in the back of their mind as they coach and develop. But what do you say to the young person who's about to embark on their career? Where should they focus their energy? How do they jumpstart their career the right way?
Yeah. So first of all, I would infuse a great deal of hope in that individual, which is the best days are ahead of you. You've got this amazing career. You can take it however and whatever place you want it to go, right? And you're coming out as knowledgeable, as hopefully adaptive. And I would really encourage them to discover like what their strengths are, what their gifts are that make them unique, and leverage those gifts, in whatever environment they go into. So that would be sort of the starting point. They come with a great benefit in that technology, they're a technology, oriented person. They're a native, right? And just about every business that you encounter, they're trying to create like a customer experience that in some way incorporates technology. So they have an advantage right off the bat, right? And so, great feeling of enthusiasm and hopefulness for them and for their future. What I would say is, one place to focus is communication, okay? How do you engage? How do you connect with other people? Technology can be a great benefit for us. It can also be a shield. Using sort of binary back and forth emails or texts or Slack channels or other ways of interacting with others, that is one way to communicate. And in some ways, it can get the job done. But if you really want to learn, if you really want to contextually engage with other people and connect with them, you got to be able to communicate with them deeply. And by doing that, many of us, it's talking, or it's engaging in a video interaction like we're doing now. You learn context of that. You deepen and build trust with other people. So I'd say really focus on communication. And then the big thing, the piece of advice that I would have is try different things. Whether that's within, and that doesn't mean like go from company to company. It may be staying within the same company, but always challenge yourself with like learning new skills and continuing the growth mindset of how to build yourself out and be more valuable. And at some level, that takes risk. That takes the notion of like, I'm going to go out here and the first 6 to 12 months of this is going to be really hard. Throw yourself into different areas, because in the long run, you will become much more valuable. You will become much more able to say, yeah, could I start my own company, or could I join a different firm later on? If you really look at the landscape of what you're getting into with a feeling of abundance, right? And how can I try and do different things? Now, early on in your career, that's the stage of your life to do it, because you're at your best ability to learn, to adapt. You're in essence, your brain and your behavioral pattern are still forming. And so now's the chance to try different things and really discover what you're really good at and what you're passionate about, and then run towards that North Star and do it in as many different facets as you possibly can, whether that be your work career, whether it be that your personal life, how you contribute to society. Once you discover that, it's like the holy grail, and you just run with it.
It's great. Yeah, you mentioned sports earlier. I had a coach growing up when I played football who would say, "Be where your feet are," was the comment he would always say when he was talking about engaging, interacting, and communicating. And now that we have this perfect square box that has potentially 75 other pop-ups up in the background in our phones, and the skill to be present and be in the moment and be where you are is one that's always stuck with me.
Yeah, it's incredible. First of all, incredible how coaches and role models and people we look up to can say certain nuggets to us, and 15, 20, 25 years later, we remember that stuff and we're like applying it in our lives. But yeah, the concept that your coach, your football coach mentioned there, in coaching, in business coaching, leadership coaching, we call that presence, right? And it's being locked in, being engaged. And there's so many things that challenge our ability right now to be present. Some of it is just like environmental broadly, right? COVID and some of the anxiety that we feel around what's going on in our society right now. It's easy to get distracted by that. But when you have the opportunity to lock in with one person and really authentically be present, put the phone aside, put all the pop-ups away and say, freeze all that and just lock in one-on-one, in this case, Sam and Ken, people know it. People sense it. By the way, your kids will know it. Your friends will know it. The colleagues around you at work will know it. And when you're able to authentically connect and be present with someone and really listen to them, wow, the power that comes out of that is, it plays back in quite a magnitude. So I couldn't agree with that thought more.
Yeah, I like that. Authentically connect. Ken, this has been great. I always like to ask people, and we've been doing this throughout the day, a final question, and it's what is your hope for the future of work?
Yeah, well, first of all, I am really hopeful about the future of work. I'm a glass half full type of a guy. I'm a growth mindset guy, and I just feel like we're moving to our best days, and that's going to be ahead of us, not behind us. And my big hope would be that more and more people, actually all people, if I had my druthers, are able to really align themselves towards a purpose that they really meaningfully connect to. And they have a job, a workplace to be able to each and every day connect to that purpose and sort of go home feeling enriched and fulfilled and challenged, and working really hard at something. I feel like if we're able to create that environment, that very hopeful environment with as many different people as possible, there's no mountain too high for us to climb together. And that's why I founded my company. That's why I dedicate all my energy around just that, one leader at a time, one organization at a time, trying to build and create that environment. And if we can do that broadly, systematically, with companies like yours, Sam, we're going to win, and people are going to feel really good about the problems that we can overcome by doing that. So that would be sort of my final thought around my hope.
Love it. That's great. Ken, thanks for spending time with us today.
Awesome, Sam. It was really my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.